Hi and welcome to this YouTube tutorial. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to build a form that is capable of accepting and saving data without reloading the page. So basically, anytime somebody hits the submit or continue button, the data is going to be sent to the backend, but the page will not reload. Now, how exactly are we going to do this? We're going to do this using JavaScript and Ajax. So right here is a form that I have built the default way in Django. So if I try to fill it right now, if I try to type in the Proton guy, and for the password, if I type in anything random and hit continue, you are going to see that the page reloaded. And after it's reloaded, there is a message that will display saying message gotten successfully. And if we go to our code, you would see that in the terminal, whatever has been typed in the front end has been sent to the backend and then printed out in the terminal right here. Now the page reloaded in this scenario and it functions perfectly, but this isn't what we want. We want the page to send the data without reloading. So what we are going to do first is that we need to get the JavaScript, the Jquery CDN, the CDN link. It's going to be in the description below. So just copy it. From the description below. And once you've copied it, go to your HTML file, and at the top of the file, just paste it in the head section. So once you've pasted it, just go ahead and save it. Now the next thing I would like to show you is how this mechanism works, this mechanism that I did before. So if I come down to the form section right here, we can see there are two input fields, which is the first one is the username and password. Now the username has the name attribute of username, and password has the password tag. The password input tag has the name attribute of password. Now this serve as these two name attributes serve as unique identifiers for me to be able to grab this data from the front end whenever a post request is coming. As you can see here, I'm saying request.post.get username and password. Now this thing that we pass into this get request, this username, it is the username that we passed into this place. So if we were to change this to username underscore value, we would have to come back to the views and change this to username underscore value. So right here, we're getting whatever is being sent from the front end and printing it out in the back end. So right now, we need to start writing code that actually sends this data without reloading the page. Now the first thing that we need to do is after pasting the CDN link, I want you to give this form an ID. So I've given mine an ID of login, and after doing that, the next thing we need to do is we need to give each input field an ID. As you can see here, I gave the username input field an ID of username, and I gave the password input field an ID of password. You can give it whatever ID name you want. So after doing all that, we need to scroll to the bottom of the page, and right before the closing tag, we need to create a script tag. So I'm just going to type in script, and after typing in script, I want you to type just follow me and let's code this out together. So I want you to type the $, and then in parentheses pass in documents, and then after passing in documents, type .on and open another parenthesis and type submit. Now I am going to explain why we're doing this. After typing in submit, put a comma, and then in quotes pass in the ID that you gave your form. So I'm going to type pass in login here. So what this line essentially is doing is that we're trying to say, okay, anytime this form is submitted, that is this login form, this is the ID we gave it here. Anytime this particular form is submitted, run this particular code. That is why we gave our form an ID earlier. So after doing that, put a comma after the ID, after you pass in the ID, and the next thing we need to do is create a function. So we'll say function, and inside parentheses we're going to pass in e. Now after doing that, we are going to come out of the parentheses and create curly brackets. After you've created the curly brackets, press enter. Now after doing that, we need to type e.prevent default. Now what does this line do? This basically prevents the page from reloading anytime we submit the form. So e.prevent default prevents the page from reloading anytime the form is submitted. Now the next thing we need to do is put in a semicolon here and press enter. Now this is where we write the main code. So we're going to pass in our $sign again and then type .ajax. Now after typing in .ajax, create open parentheses, and inside the parentheses I want you to pass in curly brackets and press enter. Now the first thing that we need to specify is the type of post that we are sending. That is it a post request? Is it a GET request? Since we're trying to send this data to the backend, it's going to be a post request because we're trying to post data to the backend. So we're going to say type, that is the type of request we're sending, and then we're going to type in posts. After typing in post, just put a comma and press enter. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to specify the URL that we're sending this post to. That is the URL that we're sending this data to, and then that ultimately links to the view. So we need to specify. So we're going to say URL. Before I specify that, I need to go back to my views.py and check. Okay, I am trying to send this data to this home view, and this home view has a URL name of login. So I'm going to copy this URL name, come back to my my HTML file, and we're going to try to link this dynamically. So just passing a colon here, and then we're going to link this dynamically the Django way. So I'm going to put my curly brackets, my %sign, and I'm going to say URL, and in quotes I'm going to pass in the name of that URL. So we're trying to send all this data to this particular URL. So when it gets to this URL, it's now sent to this view, and then data is now manipulated in in whatever way we want. Excuse me. So the next thing we need to specify is we now need to actually specify what data we are sending to the backend. Now we're going to say data, and then we're going to put a colon and create the curly brackets. Now don't forget to put a comma here. Now after creating the curly brackets, what we're going to pass into this data parameter is we're going to go into our form. And if you remember earlier, I told you to give each input tag an ID. So using these IDs, we are going to grab whatever the person has imputed into this field, and we are going to assign it to variables here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a variable and name it username, and then I'm going to equals colon, and I'm going to say the $sign open parenthesis, and in here I'm going to pass in the ID of the tag that has the username. If I scroll up, the username tag has an ID of username, so I am going to copy that and I'm going to pass in the ID. So I'm going to say hashtag because it's an ID, and I am going to paste the name of the ID. So after doing that, just say .val. So we're grabbing the value of the field, that is what has been imputed into this field. Now we need to put a comma here. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to specify the input field, that is the input field for password. Now I'm going to change this to password, and I'm going to change this to hashtag password. I'm changing this to hashtag password because I gave the input field earlier an ID of password, and I'm going to say .val. Now the last thing we need to specify is the CSRF token. If we do not specify this, it's going to crash and say server error forbidden. So what we need to say is type exactly what I'm typing right now: CSRF middleware token, and then put a colon here and the $sign, and inside the parentheses right here we're going to say input, and then after typing that we'll create a list and say name is equal to CSRF middleware token, and after doing that just close the list and come outside and say .val. Now that should be all we need to specify inside the data parameter. Now the next thing we need to specify is we need to create a success function. That is when this data has actually been delivered, that is when data has been sent to the backend, we now need to alert the user that okay, this data has been sent to the backend. Now to do that, we need to create a success function. So put a comma after this data parameter, and then once you've done that, create a type what I'm typing. So we're going to create a success function, and then inside parameter, inside a parenthesis here, we're going to pass in data. And after doing that, we open curly brackets. After opening the curly brackets, we now need to specify what div element we want to pass this message to. Remember in the views.py file earlier, anytime data is being sent from the front end, it first prints out the data and then sends a message to the front end. Now, anytime in this method that we're doing using Ajax, anytime a post request comes in, an HTTP response is going to be sent back to the front end. Now, it is inside the success function that we're going to grab this HTTP response. Now, after grabbing this HTTP response, we now actually need a place to display this message. Now, I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. So scroll up to your form area or wherever you want this message to be displayed. I want my message to be displayed inside this particular tag, this span tag. So just create a tag and make sure you leave the tag empty. So you can give the tag an ID. So I'm giving the tag an ID of success. Now take note that you should create a tag that is, this tag is going to house the message that's going to be displayed. It can be a span tag, it can be a H tag, and then leave the tag empty because we don't want anything to be displayed in the tag for now. Now, once you've given it an ID of success, or whatever ID you want to give it, scroll down to the bottom, and inside our success function, what we're going to say is we'll put the $sign, and after putting the $sign, we're going to open a parenthesis here, and in quotes we would pass in the ID that we just created for that particular element, and then we're going to say .html, and in parentheses we're going to pass in data. So what this line does is that anytime the HTTP response comes in from the backend, we're going to grab that response in this success function, and then we're going to pass that response to this particular tag. So it's going to be displayed in this particular tag right here. So after doing all that, just save the file, and that should be all the code that we need to write in our front end. Now I want you to go back to your views, and I want you to import something from Django.http. From Django.http, import HTTP response. Now we're just going to comment this out because we no longer need the messages library. So let's copy this message right here. So once we've copied that, I'm just going to say return HTTP response, and inside parentheses I'm just going to pass this in. So this is going to send this HTTP response to the front end. Now the simulation of how this is going to work is that anytime we enter something in the form, it's going to send a post request right here, and it's going to print out whatever has been typed in from the form, and then it's going to return a HTTP response. So when it returns the HTTP response, the message is going to be displayed in our front end. So that should be all the code we need to write. So let's go back to the front end, reload the page, and try again. So I'm going to type in the Proton guy, and I'm going to type in subscribe as the password. And once I hit continue, you can see it works perfectly well. You can see message gotten successfully, and if we go back to the terminal, you can see that what I entered from the front end has been displayed in the back end. That is, the message was gotten in the back end and is being displayed in the front end. Now if you want to get all the code to this project, there's going to be a link in the description below, and it's going to take you to a GitHub repo. And please kindly like, share, and subscribe. So from this tutorial, you have learned how to send data to the database without reloading the page. Now if you noticed, if I refresh, if you noticed when let me just type in something random. If you notice, when I submit, the page does not reload, and then the message, and then our message gets displayed, message gotten successfully. And if you come to the backend, you can see the message has been displayed in the terminal. So that is all for today, guys. Thank you for watching. If you like seeing content like this, please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back for more. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.